And other national, for some reason, you haven't.
Right. Good evening. We'll go ahead and call to order the Gresham-Barlow Budget Committee meeting. This is the anticipated first of potentially two meetings. And we do have a quorum this evening. We have one board member who is absent tonight, and we have one vacant position on the board. And then we have, I believe, all of our budget committee members are here. We'll see any name tags, so we do have a quorum for this evening. So what this is tonight is we'll be hearing our budget message. We will have an opportunity to ask questions for clarification and information. And whether or not what we hear tonight, there's always an option that we can say, that's it, we're good, and we can actually adopt the budget tonight. Otherwise, we have a second meeting that we do. And so later, Mr. Cook will be giving the presentation on that. The very first exciting thing that we get to do is I open the meeting as chair of the board, and then we elect a chair and a vice chair. And typically those are members of the community that fill those spots. And it's just a simple, we need to do a nominate second, just say, I want to be doing it. And if anybody else is knowing.
The motion we have in there is move to elect.
Move to elect. Okay. Okay. All right. I'm just looking at the one you sent it out. Oh, on that. Okay. There we go. Okay. Okay. Paper and electronics, it's all together. All right. So, I'll ask first of all, if there is anyone interested in being the chair of the Gresham-Barlow School District Budget Committee. And if you don't put your hand up, I might call on you. I'll volunteer.
Entertain a motion.
I would.
I'd move to elect John Hartsock as chair of the Gresham-Barlow School District Budget Committee.
All right, Mr. Hartsock, if you are elected, would you are willing to serve?
I agree.
Okay, all right. Is there for the any? We don't have to do a second. It's still, yeah. Is anyone else interested in the chair position or intend to let Mr. Hartsock have it? All right, maybe send one motion and we actually go.
So we did one more thing, so we need to vote.
Okay, all right, we'll do this one. Okay, we don't do this kind of meeting very often, so it's always like, what do we do it for? So we have Mr. Hartsock has been moved to be the chair of the Gresham-Barlow School District Budget Committee by Blake Peterson. Any discussion? No, all those in favor of John being the chair?
Aye.
Aye, any opposed? All right, thank you. And I get to turn it right over to him now.
We need vice
Vice
chair.
chair? Do I do the vice chair stuff? He's not in?
So we, you finish this and then
Okay.
give it to him.
All right, so now we need a vice chair in case that the chair is unable to attend or unable to fulfill the duties. And is there anyone that would either like to raise their hand to be vice chair or we'll pick you? Well, Blake will pick you. Yeah, all right, Dan, all right, so Dan Corcoran? Yeah. Corcoran, okay. What's that?
Yeah, I move to elect Dan Corcoran as vice chair of the Gresham-Barlow School District Budget Committee.
Okay, thank you. We didn't second, that's okay.
We're over.
It's good.
today.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine. Any discussion or? Yeah. Seeing none, Dan, if you are successful in your election, would you serve as the vice chair of the committee?
Sure.
Okay, all right, so, all those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Dan did not vote against himself. Yeah. All right, so now, Mr. Hartsock, I am going to turn this over to you, which actually is going to be turning it over to Superintendent Cook to do a opening comment, so try and keep me from interrupting you.
Okay, good.
Thank you, Chair. I want to welcome everybody as well. Thank you for coming in. This is an important meeting and I appreciate the participation for sure. Tonight, I'm going to do things a little bit differently than we've done in the past. Typically, this budget message is read verbatim and it's over 4 pages, single spaced. So what I've done is taken pieces of the important themes in this and made it part of the presentation. Hopefully that'll make it more clear as we go. And I'm gonna read the first paragraph or two to you this evening, okay? This school year has provided time for the Gresham-Barlow School District to solidify our improvement efforts and address continuing challenges. As a district, we continue to focus our efforts on deeper implementation of practices where we are seeing growth. Despite a proposed general fund increase of 1.1 billion to K-12 education, the DBSD continues to be challenged by increasing expenses in transportation, labor, general operating costs, inflation, and substantive increases to the public employee retirement system PERS rates. State funding is not keeping pace with rising costs, and we must operate within our means. In recent years, we have been using our ending fund balance to maintain current service levels and fill the gap in funding from the state. Moving forward, our spending will need to be in alignment with state funding due to the ending fund balance going below the board's required minimum of 8%. The ending fund balance is defined as unassigned funds that protect the district from unnecessary borrowing to meet cash flow needs, unexpected emergencies, and ensure a strong credit rating for the district. Increasing student literacy and math proficiency, tackling chronic absenteeism, and continuing our focus on social emotional learning while maintaining safe learning environments remains at the forefront of our work. Despite our financial challenges, we will continue to focus on providing students with the best possible education and a positive working environment for staff. And from there, I'll go into the presentation unless anybody has some questions right off. Sarah, if you're ready. While she's bringing it up, I'm really happy to say this is my first and last budget presentation. We can go into that second slide, Sarah. All right. The agenda for tonight is you saw the first piece with the budget message. We're going to go over demographics next, budget overview, looking forward, and our roles and conclusions. So 6 parts this evening. You can imagine that's the vision that we have put together is maintain our focus on things that have had the biggest impact on students, such as student literacy, math proficiency, chronic absenteeism, and social emotional learning, and operate within our means, using the board's 4 conditions for success of safety, belonging, opportunity, and achievement. And those are relatively new to us, and they are good things to anchor our work in. So moving forward. These are the goals that our leadership teams, which you'll see in a bit, kept at the forefront of the process as we were looking at the budget this year. Put safety of our students, staff, partners, and community at the forefront. Focus on maintaining quality learning for all students. Consider the needs of all students, and you'll see that soon, using a tool that prioritizes students who need the most support. And pursue reductions that support financial stability over multiple years, and that is a key one. We don't want to be where we were this spring, next spring. We can't control next biennium, but I don't want to be here next year telling you that we're cutting more money. Okay, or more services. Next slide. These are the leadership groups that did the work. We started in late December, so it's the cabinet, our instructional leadership team, Tracy, Angela, and our school principals who were brought in more in February of where are we, so we could get their input also. And this was meeting after meeting after meeting. It wasn't just brushed over. It was a lot of hours and a lot of time over several months to make sure we were making the right decisions. We also kept in contact with the GBEA and our classified employee groups. They stay away from making determinations about reductions, but they do want to be there in case we get to a RIF or in case we get to those things. So we kept them involved the whole way through, telling them where we were and what we might, and even shared our RIF process with them also. The budget is determined primarily by student count as well. So students equate to revenue, and that is primarily where our budget comes from. The proposed budget is our best shot on any given day. The reason I put that in is circumstances, you may approve it tonight. Tomorrow, we may learn something that forces us to readjust things. So it is true today, what we're presenting to you. There could be changes at the federal level or state level that cause it to not be true tomorrow. All right. Contributing factors to the shortfall, as I said in the opening statement, rising costs are the big one. Inflation, PERS, compensation, student needs are growing. We have limited revenue given where the state is, and the state has limited revenue as well. But the revenue that's been proposed by the Ways and Means Committee and the governor fall short of what we need to maintain current service level by about close to $1 billion, a little bit, $900 million. So for us, that equates to about an 8.1, a little bit more shortfall in needs. We've been experiencing declining enrollment for years. This matches a national and state trend. It's equated to birth rates and other things. We just this last year, the birth rates were the lowest in the United States that they've been since 1979. There was a point where we had almost 11,500 students. We're down to about 10,1, just right in there. And that mirrors other places. We have done a better job as a district though of maintaining our enrollment, but we are mirroring the larger society. So we are having fewer students come through our doors as everybody is. Okay. Next slide, Sarah. Or whoever. There is your enrollment trend. As you can see in 14 and 15, we were at 11.5. We're now down to about 10.1. This time of the year, we're actually closer to 10. And then over the summer, we'll have moves. So probably, if we're following trends over the past 5 or 6 years, that'll bring us up to about 10.3, and then there'll be some attrition as well. But that trend has held true for all of us for a good period of time, and we don't anticipate that that's going to change. Here's a challenge for us. This creates a budget challenge. Students with disabilities do get extra funding. Right now, 17.2% of our students have a certified disability. They qualify under IDEA. So when a student has a disability, you do get a double weight from the state. So if we get 10,000 per student, it's 20,000 for a student with a disability. That does not cover costs district-wide. And on top of that, the cap is right now at 11%. So since we have 17.2, that means about 6% of our students who have disabilities we're not funded for. That comes out of the general fund. That impacts regular ed class sizes, programs, other things, because we have to provide those services. There is a movement at the legislature. We'll go into this in a little more detail at the end of raising the cap. But as of yet, I haven't seen them identify a funding source for raising the cap. Yes.
This will true for other districts, or is this something we need to do? Gresham-Barlow?
I haven't looked at other districts, but I do think we have grown more with students with disabilities and other districts on the west side of the county. East side of the county, I do think this holds true.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions? That was a very good one. This has a significant impact on overall services because of what we need to do to provide good service to students with disabilities.
So even though enrollment is going down, our students with disability numbers are going up.
Sir,
Is the severity of disability going up as well? Which obviously is more expensive.
I have not broken it out by disability category. For education, there are 13 different categories. High incidence or low incidence high-cost disabilities. I haven't seen our numbers for outside placements change a great deal. They've been commensurate for several years, but that's about the best I can say. Next slide, please, Sarah. Here's another trend. So emerging multilingual learners are a halfway extra. So if it's 10,000 per student, we get 15,000 for students who are learning multiple languages. This increase is also substantial and doesn't always cover the cost. And to meet those needs, it also takes from that general fund to put in programs to support kids to be successful in class also. Not a qualification of whether we should or shouldn't, we absolutely should. It does put a drain on the overall resources that we have and how do we do it the best that we can. So that's another conundrum that we have, that we continue to work with. And actually, we've done a very, very good job with DLI and other things. We're really working hard to do that, but it still does present a budget challenge. Questions?
Is there a cap?
There is not a cap on EML. No. Okay, we can go forward, Sarah. These are the ratios that we showed for you last year, 24-25 budget committee. And with the reductions that we are proposing in this budget to you, they will go up a bit. But just so you know as well, we focused on reducing non-payroll items first. So that was about 40% of the reductions that we identified. That will have an impact on teachers and how they do their jobs. There are some conveniences that they have that they may not have in the future, but that needed to be first. Yes.
Does this count into that ratio?
No, these are building instructional staff.
Okay,
Yeah.
teachers in classrooms.
Yes. So the back there, what was you saying there too? Because that's a good question. Now I lost my train of thought.
Non-payroll.
Non-payroll. Thank you. And then about a third of these other reductions came out of the district office level, which was coaches and other things and administrators as well. And then the other 2/3 of what was remaining came out of the building level.
And with some of that, employee positions that were not, they were temporary positions.
We were able, that's a very good question also, we were able to avoid a reduction in force, which means reducing permanent employees. We did that through temporary positions and other people that were hired after August 1st are considered a temporary position. It still was the impact of about 47 total positions. Don't quote me on that number. I've looked at that for a bit, but right in there, is that close? So it still is less service overall, but these were people that didn't have a right to a job according to our contract at this point. So we avoided a rift. It was narrow, but we avoided one. And there was a lot of creative thinking on the part of HR to get there too.
Is the building subs part of that reduction then as well?
We haven't had building subs they were funded out of ESSER, so we haven't had them for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, for this year.
Do we have staff who are already retired and are working back?
There's,
And does that affect, and if we do, does that affect our budget? How does it affect?
They're considered temporary employees.
Yeah.
So they're year to year.
and hers, getting those two paychecks, we actually save a bit of money on people who are working back because we're not paying in hers anymore for them.
But if they're retired, do we have to pay them back?
We don't.
So if we're not.
That is.
Yes. So we did, well, I shouldn't say we, HR did a deep dive into who's certified for what, so that we could avoid a reduction in force. There were teachers that were impacted and transferred because they had the certification to teach in another place. That is always hard on a building, that's always hard on staff, that's hard on us, but it was necessary in this case to make sure that we avoided that process. All right, next slide, please. These are the assumptions as of today. Like I said in that earlier slide, some of these assumptions could change tomorrow morning depending on what we see in the news. But these are the assumptions today. We are basing the budget we are proposing to this group on 11.36 billion from the state school fund. We are using the priorities that I talked about, conditions for success, as part of those assumptions. We're assuming that 49% of that fund will come in the first year and 51% in the second year, which has been the practice in the state for a long time, except for maybe 1 or 2 exceptions. Local revenue, you can see that right there, is expected to be 41.17 million, but that just it offsets the state school fund when we do local revenue. The special revenue grants, which is SIA and high school success, we're anticipating staying at 16 million. And our debt service levy is where that is. So that's how we are budgeting. Yes.
Speaking of local revenue, have we had to offset some due to the grant, not the grant, like to bring in businesses or.
The enterprise zones, we have not had any impact on that. So,
Thank you.
Thanks for finding my words for me.
I had an idea what you were going to, so.
So next slide, and we can go into the other assumptions as well. And these are more future assumptions. District enrollment, we anticipate will continue to have that slight decline over time. I've said this in many groups, so I'll give you an example. We used to enroll close to 800 kindergartners a year steadily for a long time, but early in my first 15 years in the district. We are breaking 650, 670 right now, and that's been consistent over time. So when you see that size of a class come in and that continues to work upward, you have fewer students. And that matches birth rates in the area.
Did the personnel assumptions or the staffing assumptions correlate also with declining enrollment, or did we assume?
We're assuming the enrollment base, and that's what we're predicting our revenue on, so yes.
Okay, so revenue side, but the expense side, are we also assuming a declining enrollment, or are we assuming that?
That's a good question.
We are,
We are.
the revenues generated by the enrollment and then.
Okay, so those numbers, those assumptions match on both sides.
Yeah.
Federal funding is uncertain, and that is a big chunk of our services, title programs, et cetera. And there's even been talk about IDEA, which is the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, and you saw our numbers there. If decisions are made there that have huge financial impact, that's going to be a challenge moving forward, and we just don't know right now.
How is it budgeted?
It isn't. We know how much well, that's not true. Title I wise, we've been anticipating a 25% reduction. We don't know those numbers until September regularly. That's when they come out. So that's what we're anticipating. That would mean about a $650,000 reduction to title. And I saw that number about a week ago, so give me some flex on that. The other titles, not sure. Future negotiated salary increases, that is an assumption in here. We are negotiating with our classified unit next year. So that has been put into the budget. So we'll see where that ends up. We're also anticipating an ending fund balance at 7.4%, which is 0.6% below the board's required 8%. We have had that conversation with the board. Additional revenues that come in at this point will have to be added back to that ending fund balance to get us to an 8%. And then after that, we could use that for services. And PERS increases. One of the things, if you watch very closely, is when you look at that stock market, which has been pretty volatile the past couple of weeks, our investments in PERS are dependent on that market. So they're telling us next biennium is already going to be a challenge. If we continue to see the kind of volatility we've been seeing recently, that could be an even bigger challenge going into the next biennium.
Don't we have extra PERS costs because of the bonds going away?
Extra PERS costs because of the bonds going on, I'm not following them.
We have our two PERS bonds
Got it.
that will expire in 26 and 27. There, yet the issue with those PERS bonds is because of the poor performance of the market and increased salary costs, a pot of money is being used quicker than it was anticipated. So we have been in discussion on how we look at stabilizing the PERS fund until, when that happens, so that if we need to set reserves out of the budget to address those things in future years, we'll have that set up so we can address that, and we just don't run it dry and don't pay off the rest of the bond. So, and that's a very large conversation going on in the state with districts, with the OASBO business unit folks to address that and make sure the state and the legislature is taking that into account when they are talking about things that are going to be fine. And there's talk about the the PERS board having some money available, they may distribute to districts to help offset that. So it is on the radar, it's being discussed, and we will fill in the details as they become more solid.
As it stands now, it shouldn't affect this budget, this first half of this budget, because it's a 2-year budget. It may affect the second.
What will affect is being able, at say, the end of the year, if we have an excess in revenue or expenditures, being able to move some of that money into a special fund to build up a balance to address that. So, and potentially at the end of the 25-26 year, the leadership could look at that and say, okay, we got a little bit of money. Do we need that for next year to keep levels at where we want them to be? Or do we have the opportunity to put that in the bank for future PERS requirements? And that will be done every year when addressing different things that need to be funded.
For another bit of context, so you understand ending fund balance as well. It costs us about $680,000 a day to run the district. That's just regular service level. When you look at an 8% ending fund balance, that gets us about 20.5 days, 21 days of operating costs, which is not a great deal. That's a tight budget. In the 2008 recession, we got down to 1 day, 300,000. So I would prefer, and that's when we had 5% ending fund balance requirement. 8% puts us in a much better position.
I don't want to jump the gun.
Sure.
When we talk budget, I have a question about what that ending fund balance is.
You'll see it soon.
Perfect, okay.
Yeah. So that's a good, we can transition into the next slide. These I fumble on every time I try, so I'm gonna rely on Tracy and Dennis to help me out, and others as well. I'll call on them so I don't fumble and give you misinformation. So you're looking at 3 lines here: general fund, special revenue funds, and special revenue without ESSER. Soon, hopefully, in the next budget cycle, we won't have to show you ESSER anymore to explain why we've had different bumps in there. But when you look at the 2023 and 2024 actual, the separation in those 2 lines on the bottom is really related to ESSER. All right, so now we're getting to the end of those 2 lines, it's starting to come back into alignment where we were in the past. ESSER was just that bubble, if that makes sense. And did I explain that correctly? Thank you. All right. And then you're looking at our general fund and our costs, and what you can also see here is, I believe, because I'm not seeing a line separate well either, 181 million is our, is that our, you go ahead and give me that.
Resources.
That's our resources. And the 176 is?
Resources is all of our money.
Got it.
Fund balance, it's our
Got it.
revenue,
Thank you.
it's everything that comes in. Yeah, the next slide will actually show a revenue and you'll see where you differentiate, because in the 181 million includes a fund balance and contingency line, which generally don't show up as in the resources of the requirements and expenditures.
Can I add just a little bit?
You may.
So if you're looking at all those green lines, the straight line is a trend line, right? That's showing what we would anticipate over time in terms of growth. So that darker green line, the one that's on the bottom, is an important one to look at in terms of the grant funding we get and the money that we will continue to get year after year. And there are some years in there where we are below the trend line. We have an increase next year, but that gap there between the lighter green and the darker green is where ESSER comes into play, just to make that a little bit more clear. The special revenue funds with grants really can fluctuate pretty dramatic.
Our SIA special revenue,
Yes.
okay, is there? Over time. Is there a possibility that we see the blue line traded off for the green line as the state prioritizes accountability measures within funding? Is
I
that kind of how that
haven't
would work?
necessarily heard that, and help me, everybody, when I hear about the accountability, it's more about they would, dictate how to use a portion of our general fund and all of our SI.
Oh, so it wouldn't
So
necessarily
it's
be
not so
grant
much-
funded, but it would be directed.
It would be directed, that's
Okay.
all better than dictated.
Yeah.
Couldn't find the word.
Same result.
Yeah.
Just a little polished.
It's a little more my style.
Other,
Really?
other, questions on this slide?
So looking at the blue line there, we're looking at a $13.5 million reserve fund at the end of it.
You'll see that at the end, close to that. Okay, next slide, please. Go ahead, take a lead.
Requirements equals expenditures, so just thinking about financial requirements that we have, so the line at the top is really the same. You see that is our general fund expenditures, and you see a trend line there. You can see a little bit more variability on the bottom lines with special revenue and where ESSER kind of comes into play, but it's the same kind of scenario where you have the special revenue funds, the red is all of the funds that include ESSER. And the yellow line is the special revenue expenses that don't include ESSER. So you can just kind of see how those kind of veered apart for a few years, and now we're back on track and back in line.
Sir,
I'm having questions, but I promise I'll hit the quota soon.
is there one?
No.
Okay.
It's a long time to get there.
Would anybody have context for 2024 budget? What that blue line number would be budgetarily? Because if I'm reading it right, 2025 budget, we'd assume that blue line will actually land low with that. From an expense side, or am I? Because we go from actuals into budgetary.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering what that trend line would look like with the 24 budget.
Historically, expenditures have been less than revenues. So that would drop that number down. But again, historically, in this 24-25 year, we're having some challenges with transportation and some other areas that will impact that more. And it would decrease that amount than what we have seen in the past. So traditionally, we have one track that is the same.
And a quick side to that too, because historically, as a district, we've been pretty conservative on how we budget. And that has served us very well. It's made it consistent in staffing. We don't experience the big ups and downs of other districts. If you pay attention to the news in other districts right now, we are one of the very few that's not in a reduction in force. We were able to do all these things because of that steady conservative budgeting. Our neighbors are in bad shape. All over the county, they're in bad shape. All over the state, it's been pretty hard. We're not there. Our 8 million is doable when you have districts that are 2,000 or 3,000 students less than us, and they're cutting between 12 and 20 million, depending on the district. That's big. And we're not there. Okay.
So I kind of want to go back to your question.
Yeah.
So the 24 actual expenses, right, is the 157. 25 budget. Am I right in thinking the 25 budget would include contingency, and in 24 it wouldn't, because 24 would be based on what actually went out the door, and 25 would have been based on what is anticipated out the door?
So, good question, and yes, so. In theory, right, because you don't spend contingency, you have to move it to an expense line, and then you spend whatever you've moved it to. And we do know that in 23, 24, we did transfer the contingency to expenses, so it was spent.
So theoretically, if we hit the budget for 25 dead on, we would have come in, and I'm making it a $3 million contingency, we would have come in at 173, not 176, because we never had to pull in.
Right,
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And there's one additional flavor, which is that due to the recommendations of our audit firm last time, both our expenditures and our revenues are going to commensurately increase as we do that math that we kind of talked about before, where they said, if you get a credit, you have to count that credit as revenue. You can't count it as negative expense. So both will be climbing. So I would say that there is potential for it to be a little closer to that 176 number. I would still say less, a little.
Not a perfect comparison.
I-
sort of like-
Yeah, and I think to contextualize why I'm asking the question, because I think we're gonna start tackling numbers related to fund balances.
Yeah.
That either assume the full expense of the 25 budget. Which I think we're gonna be closer to than we have in past years, is what,
Yes.
like what I'm hearing from you, so just. If we're assuming full expense of that. Budget, yeah, it would reflect a level of conservatism in the budget.
Yes. Okay, next slide, Sarah, please. Which one of you wants to take this one? Tracy, go ahead, you're smiling. Okay, Dennis, go ahead.
This looks at, the expenditures and the revenues is one picture. You have the green line, which is resources, which is everything, that's fund balance. Every single penny we have. The, pink line and the burgundy line are how the revenues and expenditures track together. So the money we have coming in versus the money we're spending out. As you can see early on, burgundy or the revenues, burgundy was higher than the expenditures, and the district was able to work on growing that fund balance. More recently, it's been a little bit up and down since 2023. 23 we overspent, 24 we underspent, 25 we're projecting an overspend, 26 we're projecting best hope that it comes in at least flat. So this just gives the picture of how those two track together throughout time. And they're both trending up, and in general, expenditures have been higher than revenues. And we knew that. That was a conscious decision because of the fund balance to do that, to reduce that to a more manageable level. That's not, that's not something that can be sustained, and that's what this is really trying to say, is we can't sustain those continued deficits budgeting over time.
And we did present that to the budget committee the last 2 years, and we were deficit spending, and that we knew we would not be able to do that for much longer. Sarah, there you go. Here is the fund balance and where we've been. So at the peak of 26.8 million, that was after the pandemic. It was cheaper to run schools during the pandemic. We had all kinds of extra revenue coming in to do other things with ESSER, and our ending fund balance was, we, believe it or not, we struggled to spend money at that time. We're not there anymore. We have been adding staff. We've been deficit spending like we have told you. And now we're getting down to that 8% again, and we have to live within our means.
Just for clarification,
Yes.
the 8% isn't again, because it used to be 5%.
Correct. And last spring, for more clarification, the board elected for good reason to change policy from 5 to 8%. That was part of the reason is we had money in the ending fund balance, and that was the time to do it so that we could be more stable. And I'll give you an illustration of more stable, and correct me on these details. We don't like to be in a position of borrowing money, but to bridge the gap to meet payroll in September, we always have to use ending fund balance, because the next check doesn't come in until that end of that month. So we are using our savings to make sure we hit payroll in September. If we didn't have that ending fund balance, that's one example where we'd have to take out a short-term loan and then pay extra money for that, where we don't have to when we have an ending fund balance. And if you do get in a position where you have to get a loan, you have to borrow for some reason, we maintain a very good credit rating and we get a very good rate, so it's cheaper.
What is the first paycheck amount in the school year?
The first paycheck, so here's a nuance that you need to understand first is, we're on a 12-month cycle for our employees, but in June, they get 3 paychecks. So it's June, July, and August. September is the first one for that next school year. So that's where we are waiting for that check from the state to come. That's when we use the ending fund balance in payroll. That's why one of the reasons you have an ending fund balance.
How much of the $8 million or $12 million does it use?
What is a month of payroll?
Yeah, can you have a ballpark on a month of payroll for you?
Approximately 8 or 9, depending.
Yeah. Okay.
So it benefits the whole thing.
Yep. It eats at it for sure. Okay. And here is your budget, the numbers, moving into next year. I'll let you take a look at that in a minute. You can ask questions or gather.
I have a question, what contingency is based on? The 2.5 million.
It used to be 3.5, the contingency. What are we basing that number on?
Well, it's based on, the contingency is figured, the 8% is figured as 8% of the expenditure budget minus any transfers. Doesn't include fund balance or contingency. It's basically, if we had $100 million budget, 8% will be calculated on that. So,
But I think you were asking the individual contingency.
Well, no, I'm glad you said it that way. So does the ending fund balance at the 8% mark, look at ending fund balance plus contingency, or just ending fund balance? What's the 7.4?
Yeah, so it's including, it's before contingency, so it's including both, so you can see where it says contingency /reserve. which
Yes.
is the Contingency / ending fund balance, it's both, the 13,269 and then the 12,348 is comprised of 9,848,000 in ending fund balance and 2,005,000 in contingency.
Yeah, is there a reason for the $2.5 million?
I think it's historically just what we've learned is that in that 23-24 year, you were asking about whether we spent the contingency. It was only like $1 million something that year. It had been 10 million the year before. So it was like, we just kind of learned where it should be. And was 3 million.
If you put an amount as an ending fund balance and get that approved, that cannot be used for anything, out special approval. So to Becky's point, here we had only $1 million in contingency. That, potentially could have caused some issues because we only had that much in true savings. So for this year, we have about 3 million in contingency. Going forward, we're using 2 million as a placeholder with the intent that we don't use that number. But we don't want to be putting ourselves in a position where we can't do things because we put too much in the ending fund balance and not giving us any flexibility.
So we're locking this 9.848 ending fund balance.
Yes.
And that flexes up to that above it. This is the 12.3 because that's the two put together.
Yes.
And many of you understand this. Let's show you how tight a $2 million contingency is, or a 2.5. And this goes back to even 2005. We discovered at Clear Creek when I was principal that the windows were installed incorrectly in original construction, but the company that installed them went out of business and they didn't have any, there was nothing for us to do. The windows were causing black mold, and in 2005, to replace those front windows, it was $2 million. We have $500 million in capital assets. 2 million on a major thing, any kind of roof thing goes like this. So even that 2 million contingency is very tight. Okay. Questions? No? All right. So looking forward, we can go past this one too. These are things that we are keeping an eye on too. And I don't want to take any, none of this is not important to talk about. We all want to talk about these things, but unless they come with a source, a finance source, they don't do us any good. It's an unfunded mandate that puts a bigger strain on our state school fund. So special education funding bills, that 2953 lifting the cap, that would be great because of our 17%. That would help us. On the other hand, if they're just gonna say they're gonna lift the cap and you take it out of the 11.36, it doesn't do a thing for us. 2448, so you understand the high cost disability account. An outside placement for a student, whether it's for behavior, low incidence, high cost disability, is about $120,000 to $150,000 for one student. If you only get 20,000 for that student, you're pulling that revenue from somewhere else. And that's a drain on the classrooms for sure. If they fully fund high cost disability for us, that would be a good thing for us. That would give some serious revenue that would help us rebuild that ending fund balance and provide more service, but it has to come with the revenue. It can't just tell us it comes out on 1136. The early intervention, 40 million additional investment could help as well. School meals for all, that doesn't as much impact us, but it's something that we're paying attention to because it would be great for us to be able to feed all of our kids all the time. Summer learning, which I believe will pass, is additional revenue, but now that we know that it's coming late to pull off the comprehensive summer programs that we've done the past 2 years, if you don't start in November, you are behind the 8 ball for sure, and that's gonna be a tough lift for us if it comes this year.
Will you be able to roll it up?
No. The other piece is there's some concerning requirements in that they want it to be literacy focused. And and that's not a bad thing. Literacy is great. You tell me any one of our kids is gonna come in the summer to do reading all the time. They like high interest things. So when the legislature puts in contingencies like that, you don't get a lot of participation.
There's also requirements around the number of hours and a lot of different things that come into play with that as well.
There's an early literacy initiative that could help. Mandating class size, that's something I'd love to be able to talk about it, but it's back to that. You've seen our budget here. If it doesn't come with revenue, all we're doing is fighting amongst funds that we don't have. That makes it a challenge. And the next budget forecast, the key one, which will give the legislature time to move forward and approve a budget, get it to the governor, is May 14th. We'll be watching it closely. The last one saw a slight increase in revenue. I don't anticipate that the May 14th will see a big increase in revenue. So I think we've seen what we're gonna see.
So all of these bills have passed first committee, so they're not off the table.
They're not off the table. Yeah. Okay. Next slide, please, sir. Federal funding for various programs and legal mandates is uncertain. We know that, we block it. Congress has finished a resolution this year that leaves the title fund stable for this year, taking us to September 30th. They have not done that, which is unusual for the next fiscal year. So we don't know what that means for us. And all of those things that I've listed up there could be impacted and we receive funds for all of those. Like I said, there's the fiscal year ends September 30th. So this is an uncertainty and we may not know until September. And I'm back to that little bullet I gave you in the beginning. This budget is true right now. It may not be true in a week or in September. Question?
You said it's unusual to not have the next fiscal year sort of penciled out at this point.
Yes, but title monies never really come until September. We're never sure. And Title I's been flat funded for 3 or 4 years. So we were looking at reductions anyway, because labor costs go up. So if they're not increasing it every year, you have to right size somehow. This year, because of what we're hearing, it's in anywhere from a 5 to a 25% cut on top of we've been flat funded for 3 or 4 years.
Usually in April, we get a preliminary kind of peek at what we can expect, and so then we can kind of, you know, do some best guessing. Right now, it's just rumors of some reductions, some title programs being completely cut. So.
The question on the federal funding, there was a rural schools things that, tax funded rural schools, is that does the state rebalance money when that money disappears?
If they have it to rebalance, yes. So the other things that the state is concerned about, which could impact K-12, is if Medicare goes away, or if it's impacted. This is a state that would like to backfill that. That could come out of K-12. It's not like they have money everywhere. So there's a lot of things that we don't see directly that don't impact us, but it could have an impact on us depending on what happens.
Did rural schools drop off last year?
Not last year.
Or is it dropping up or is it this year?
I think it's this year. It was in the news today.
Oh, it was, I just remember hearing that it didn't get continued.
Yeah, I only saw the article about it. The article I saw came out today,
So
so
the state may rebalance money to make up for that.
they might. Since 2008, but there's contingencies on this. The state has built a rainy day fund that we didn't have before that recession time. And it's got a healthy balance to it, but they may still want to save it for that rainy day. And this isn't an economic rainy day. Yeah, right.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions? Okay. Our roles and next steps, we can go forward on that one. So tonight, our role, administrators, is propose a budget and then be here to advise, give information. The budget committee stays at a very high level. of approval. So it's in the function level, these areas. This is the approval. Line item is really stays within admin. But the questions you've asked tonight are reasonable questions, so you have some background. So I'm happy to answer those anytime. But this committee approves at that function level. You'll also approve tax rates, and if you, I should say, approve it tonight, you may not approve it tonight. You may want to go to another meeting. On the other hand, this is where your level of responsibility is. Sarah, you want to go to that next slide? Your options are approve as proposed, increase an appropriation at the function level, decrease an appropriation, move between functions. After those decisions are made, it's tax rate and number limitations, for the board and administration. And then after adoption, budget adjustments, like I've been telling you the entire time, might continue based on what we face, over the next 16 weeks.
They add board can adjust the budget up to 10%.
Thank you. John is correct. Board can make adjustments up to 10%.
If it's going to be more than 10%, then the budget committee has to be reconvened and go through the process again.
Questions and discussion on roles and responsibilities.
It was, I read through all this, you know, and what you notice is this where we maybe ask questions about those specific things.
Okay.
I think that's actually the next agenda item.
It is.
Now, up to the,
Let's finish the last two slides, then we'll get to questions for you. Cool. This budget is informed by the board's conditions and by our priorities when it comes to instruction, things that we are doing. The budget development is a multi-month process. We actually started back in November. It takes a long time to bring a budget forward. This year was a bit more difficult simply because we were facing a deficit and we had to have way more meetings than we normally would to get a budget together for you. And then here we are to the questions piece. So there's your little background, and now we can take what you want to put on the table. Oh, so the dates are there. I was gonna get to that after the question. But here's the dates. We can meet again on April 23rd, and the budget hearing, the board budget hearing is scheduled for June 4th, right before the business meeting. Now can I go for vote? Oh, that's true. Chair.
okay, we'll move on to the next item, which are comments or questions from the budget committee. So with that, I'll open the floor to budget committee questions.
Yeah, page 3. On part of FT listed. I'm noticing there's an increase in administrative classified positions. And a decrease of licensed positions that's double that. Am I reading that right? We're gonna get 624-ish positions to 606.
We have. No, and I'll let these people comment on the page. We've reduced 4 total administrative positions and a number of coaching positions from the district office. So the 3 assistant principals and 1 district office position.
So am I reading that little table at the bottom right corner of page 3 wrong?
So
You may.
So I think probably part of the confusion is that it shows the adopted budget and not what is reality as of our snapshot in January of 2025. So reductions may have, when we talk about making reductions, it was from current staff, not necessarily from what it showed as an estimate a year plus ago.
Okay,
Does that make sense at all?
I guess do we have real numbers on that then?
So if you want more detailed breakout on the FTE, it would be towards the back of the book. One of the very last. And that could be a little more general fund versus spec rev. A little more information,
Page 1.
145,
But that's still budget to budget.
And what's that?
I think that's still budget to budget, right? 24 budget.
Right.
Good. The question is, where are we at now?
Yeah, right. How many teachers, admins, classified staff do we have now? How many we're gonna have afterwards? And it's the only place I found it in there.
think if you're looking at total general fund FTE, if I'm looking at line 958 down to 908.
Okay, so. The current 24-25 is just not correct, then I guess, am I reading that right?
Well, page 145 is still showing the adopted budget, not current.
Correct, adopted budget for 24-25.
Is, again, the question I think is there a place in here where it shows current FTE?
Current FTE in the various different roles versus what our proposed is. Yeah,
And if I recall, it's like budget document rules,
It
you
is.
can't put any actuals
oh, okay.
that aren't done full year, so.
The year is.
And my work is going through quite a lot of that, so I mean, I'm familiar with, you know,
Oh, yeah.
how many do you have now, how many you're gonna have later. So,
With this question on page 145, you see the reduction of, I think you said 47, it looks like it might be 49,
Mm-hmm.
in regular instruction, support services, special revenue. Can you explain how you have an increase of 30?
Yeah.
Yeah, an increase of 30, 40, 41.
I can't explain that. So specifically with SIA and also with Measure 98, many of the reductions that we made, the assistant principals, many of the instructional coaches were funded in SIA. So those positions were reduced or eliminated, and we moved general fund positions into SIA to keep that job.
Gotcha.
So that's why there's an increase in FTE and special revenue. Yep. It's also what makes this not sustainable.
Yeah.
Right, long term, because if our SIA funds are not growing at the rate of our salary increases, we're gonna end up upside down again.
Sorry, I'm gonna ask, and maybe the answer already came. The question. I'm still a little bit hung up. So the question about admin increasing from 60.75 to 63.7 ties out to this table. Did we pick up additional admin positions? Like, how would we see that reduction? Did we somehow pick up additional admin positions from budget last year to now?
I don't think so. No.
That came on with DLR
Mhm.
when we were preparing to move into,
No.
middle school.
No, no, and I don't know.
What page you looking at, like, spell 3?
145, but the table on
Okay.
page 3.
Okay.
I find it weird to not know how many employees you currently have.
I can tell you that we have 1,215 employees and about 1178.75 FTE. That's not reflected in here because of where we are, so.
So for me, it throws me off.
Right.
I don't know you're like me.
Is that overall? So it's part of that change that Tracy's talking about. If you look at general fund admin up here, there's no increase. There is an increase in spec rev, and that's part of those changes that Tracy was talking about.
And I'm not advocating for.
No, I get you, but it's a good question. Yeah.
And then that because of the spec rev,
Okay, so
right? Because the front table combines
I do, I think.
spec rev and general.
And the idea. Okay. I was looking at a community facing system. So special revenue
On page 145.
is not targeted funds. Yeah, so looking back at 145, that's where we see admin positions jumping. Particularly in support services.
Correct. And so, 31 positions. those are currently exist, so, we have coaches. How are they, I guess I'm confused about how they're currently in here as 2024, 2025.
Here's what you're picking up on, and then I'll try to give you the best answer I can. With the addition of SIA and high school success and rules that go with that, and budget committees don't govern those special revenue funds. You still govern the state school fund. But we are using the special revenue fund to backfill for classrooms and building support.
Okay.
That does cause some discrepancies in what you're seeing here, and I think you do deserve an answer, but it has made budgeting so much more complex than it was even 7 years ago.
Yeah.
We're literally moving pieces of people, partial pieces of people to different funding sources to meet the requirements, but also to maintain that job, which is.
That's what funds my current job.
Right.
Yeah.
And it makes this not as easy, like I said, 7 years ago, you could look at this budget book and you could see where you were. Now I'm seeing why it's harder.
Thank you.
With the question on the FTE first, thanks to all the accounting staff for putting this together with the breakdown and splitting out the FTE so we can see where all the people go. I greatly appreciate that. I had a question. You mentioned 1157, I think, and 101.
We have 1,002, when I did the math a week ago, we had 1,215 employees, not all of them.
And then 1150 or 1178 FTE.
Right.
And then you had mentioned that we're gonna reduce it down to 1157-ish.
We reduced about 47 total FTE. That doesn't necessarily equate to 47 people. Because there were different positions.
How does that connect to the 1,073
What page are you on?
on 145?
Still on 145.
At the bottom,
Or on,
it doesn't equate even well, simply because of that SIA, high school success, moving pieces between those two grant funds when you don't also govern the grant funds. So you don't see it as clearly, and I'm wondering how we would present that to you more clearly, because this is what you normally present, but I see the questions. Kind of open to thoughts on that.
I'll be candid, I think I'm just buckling up for a level of public scrutiny that we
Yeah.
probably never experienced.
Exactly.
And I think it's really important to educate the public, and it was talked about in the beginning, and then I feel like the whole tenure of question since have been a little bit more focused on the very important difference between current versus adopted. That they're different bases completely. What we budgeted last year is not exactly what happened, nor should it have been. So comparing a budget last year to a budget this year is not comparing actual last year to this year. So,
The way it's budget now.
yeah.
and like we said, the law prevents us from including actual FTE numbers, because that's a much
That's
more
so weird.
complex legal process that involves other entities.
And the other piece, the way I'm understanding it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that the other piece of the budget is in those grants, and that piece of the budget is not totaled in with these. So is there a way maybe that we can see the totals from those grants, even though this committee doesn't?
Good informational section.
Because it
Just big bucket amounts, so that
Right.
they can see that the totals match up, even though.
Well, what Pete said, although I think, total FTE out of the grants.
So what it is more, I think, a little bit kind of to this questions, is the budget used to be funded by much more limited dollars. They came from the state, they came some from the
One
federal,
source,
they came from the
yeah.
rural schools.
Fewer.
So they came from very limited sources. And I think over the last few years, we've had money from the SIA, from ESSER, from Measure 98, from a bunch of different sources, like you said, funding part of this person, part of that person. And probably not what would be in the budget book, but it sounds like just a document that would show somehow without a lot of time,
And what Pete said.
the money kind of that comes in that equates to how many employees does that support? You know, does that make sense?
Even though they're not employees, they're pieces of employees.
Yes.
Pieces
How
of
many
employees,
FTEs?
yeah, how many, yeah, 2/3 of.
Yeah, that's the-
Yeah,
Yeah, so no,
Because they're here, they're being just paid out of different pots of money.
But
I
that's,
think the difference is, so SIA, those special revenue funded staff members are included in that bottom half.
Mhm.
The number at the very bottom is total FTE. We have many people that are a 0.5 FTE, so your number of 1,215 employees can be right. While some of those are not full FTE people.
Uh-huh.
In fact, most of our classified staff are not full FTE.
That's
Okay.
but
I
I
think
think,
that's the piece. I get a nod from Pete, that always makes you.
Okay.
And the other misimpression I don't want to give, because we were talking about moving FTE between the grants. The grants also have complex rules. And we need to follow those rules when we're doing, so there is movement, but we're following rules at the same time, which makes this even harder. And what Pete said before too, which will make it impossible to reconcile these things, is that it's a 24-25 adopted. It's not necessarily the actual of what we've done this year.
yeah, I mean, I think. I feel like to synthesize, I mean, I think that the question still holds,
Mhm.
but then it's a. Cause I think it's half Faden's question, half Blake's question put together is still on the table, which
It's
is to
still one
say,
question.
yeah. So if the, SIA and the other funds are in this special revenue section, which they are, so that gives you a total FTE count at the bottom, which does include non-general fund FTE. Then either we budget boo-booed and had too few admin FTEs in 24-25, or we added between adopting the budget 24-25 and what's proposed for 25-26.
Yeah.
So both of these questions are still valid, which is, yeah.
And I can promise you we didn't add.
I remember your slide from 101, which is dead straight line, so when I saw
That was
this.
in my notes too, which is why I like it.
Yeah.
And it went from 1180 something to
Yeah.
1157.
So my brain goes like job classification, like this job code moved from one bucket to another. That's what could cause something like that. I don't know if this is.
So 80 off.
And that could. And it depends on the admin, it depends on the presentation too. Some of our office managers who are not licensed admin are counted in the admin line as well.
But was that consistent? From the last 3 years?
Yeah.
Is that, or is that new?
Yes.
Yeah. Cause that
It's
was,
consistent.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is a pathway to the solution or if this further conflates things. What is additional salaries for each of the departments, elementary instruction, I'm looking at on page 27? Do you have licensed salaries, classified salaries for all the staff of the elementary schools? And then you'd have, in object 140, you have additional salaries.
So there's this thing that we abbreviate all the time in our world called ATTW, which stands for additions to time worked. And that would be, for instance, I feel like the education folks can speak more to this than I can, but an example that I always put in my head is a teacher needs to cover 1 extra hour to cover someone else to go to a professional development training, for instance, is a classic example. What are some other ATTW?
If there's an evening event that you require staff to attend, we pay them, that's HTW. If we pull a curriculum team together after hours, that's HTW. Contractually, we're pretty limited
yeah,
on
I was gonna say, most of that's governed by
the
our
contract.
yeah.
Your work, you get paid.
Yeah. Great question.
I have more. On page 43, for charter schools, there appears to be quite a large increase proposed in the upcoming budget. $2.3 million in increase. That seems like a lot, in comparison. It has went up in the past, but is that normal? It's
One of the key drivers in that is our Lehigh Charter School.
okay.
Their enrollment rates have grown substantially post-pandemic. So that has driven that number up. Additionally, the per pupil allocation for charter schools can be different and higher than what GBSD gets for their students. So the states, I tried to understand that, I don't get it all, but so those are really the 2 key drivers that are driving any increases in enrollment in charters in general, particularly in the and then an increase in the overall per pupil rate for those students that attend charter schools.
Thank you for explaining that.
Could I follow up? Bill?
Sure.
There would be a revenue correlation assumed in your enrollment projection that would match.
It is part of the state school fund. When they do our ADMW, they include the charter school enrollment. So when we get funded, let's say on 12,000 ADMW, that includes the money. It's not a special amount that comes. So yes, but there is an allocation that is part of the general state school fund that we have to set aside for the schools.
I think, thank you. Asking maybe a correlating question. So when we talk about a budgeted declined enrollment, that includes a bump in enrollment to me. We're just in
Yes.
effect paying more out the door so not only are we projecting a declining enrollment. And with those special categories that are more costly perhaps, we're also not getting, we're passing through 80%.
Yeah.
Of
To illustrate that, we're right about 10,000 students right now in our 17 schools. And if you count in the charters, we're about 11,450 right now. So there's 1,500 students enrolled charter wise.
So just confirming, so when we budget revenue, on the revenue side, we're assuming 11,450 students. Okay. We're in the weeds, I know.
I know you are, still, but I
People
think
who
what.
call me are gonna be in the weeds.
Blake, I think what you said is true, though. There's going to be scrutiny. Everybody is reducing. Answering these questions is important, whether it's in your purview to approve or not. People need to understand, and it's complex.
Yeah, I mean, I think, Ben, I saw the same thing, and one of the things I also flagged is I'm the giant nerd with multiple years of budget books.
Did you bring us?
Yes, welcome to my world.
Part of that was just because like I had to see it on paper and I had to do it at my kid's soccer practice because I was behind on my life this morning. So 1633 was last year's charter school number and 1576 is in the overview page 4 for this year. So I've got us as down on charter school.
No,
But then, yeah,
it might be shut up.
so, yeah, up on dollars and then, again, I looked at the most recent financials for going to the board and the charter school payments are 15 even is the annual projection. So even over that, there's a boost going.
There is.
I think it's in the spirit of understanding the budget methodology more than anything else, because the only thing it would get us is we would tighten that assumption and maybe move it to another category from at least a budget committee perspective, not necessarily that it does anything.
But you don't
And
know,
I'll be like somebody who asks a lot of questions everywhere I go, so.
but you don't know over the year what circumstances can change that ratio of students learn schools, or they're all our schools, from the district schools to the charters. And that could change mid-year.
Yeah.
In fact, there was a fairly large change in this last year in New.
It was.
And that can change throughout the year.
Right.
We have seen changes this current year. The law has gone quicker than anticipated. Where the other charters are pretty stable, but New is kind of driving that train right now.
And to answer your question on numbers directly, looking at numbers today, there's 1,512 in the charters in there.
That's pretty close.
And yeah, I'm more, 1, 2 here, there, that's not where I'm after, it's more, as long as the arrows are all pointing in the same direction, okay.
Yeah.
That sort of washes, it's more that we've got kind of arrows pointing in different ways that make me wonder like what the balancing item is. We got enrollment going one way, and John, is your point that there might be a shift between charters that causes like a cost ratio mix?
There are a couple things in the mix right now. There's a bill on the in the legislature about increasing the pass-through. So at high school right now, I think the pass-through is 95%, at the other grades, it's 80. So
It's required.
that's required. They're talking about increasing that. If they do, that'll be an impact to our budget.
And that's us keeping 5 or 20. and
Yes.
Okay.
Exactly.
That bill has died, however, they're going to form a charter committee in the interim and do a kind of a study. So it is possible out of that we may see an increase in pass-through for our K-8 charters.
Okay. Well, I mean, to be fair, our K-8 charters are having the same financial challenges that we are. People are looking for revenue, and that's hard.
I think to just summarize kind of the category of question that I keep asking, and this isn't a question, it's just an observation. I think in the past, and if I'm wrong on this, you guys should correct me. I've generally understood that we budgeted revenue assuming a low enrollment or a lower enrollment. We budgeted our expense on a higher enrollment. We've had that luxury. It sounds like those numbers are correlated more in this budget. So if we assume 11,000 students, we're assuming it on the revenue side, we're assuming it on the expense side, and how they're divvied up between charters. That's shifting.
That is my understanding. I'll defer to the team to make sure that I'm right.
It is, I mean, because the first thing we have to set is our revenue, so we know what we're going to be getting in. And that revenue is based on our, predominantly on our enrollment projection. We'll use that number then to start on the expenditure side, tying the revenues based on the low enrollment to the amount of expenditures we have, which then should correlate to a lower enrollment.
Am I wrong that in past practice, we've maybe dealt with it with two different assumptions, an assumption on the revenue side and an assumption on the expense side? I'd love to correct myself on that.
I thought we kept the enrollment the same, but the FTE assumption was a 0 vacancy. And so that was a thought.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I understood the same way that we assumed low enrollment and propose, or budget words. Proposed a higher budget, that's probably. the
Extra
word,
salary,
So
yeah.
that there was more, yeah.
And that was just, yeah, that's how I thought we did it, was enrollment was steady state, but we
Yeah.
assumed we were gonna fill every single position for the full year, and that's what we want.
And never do.
Therefore, yeah, and that automatically spins down to the
Yes.
expense a little bit.
So everybody can hear that answer. What did you just share with?
I was just confirming that the last three comments that were trying to remember what had been said in past. I can confirm that our previous director of finance, Jordan Ely, that was his modus operandi. Was exactly what you're talking about, where the conservatism was built in with forecasting low enrollment and less or full employment with less attrition than we actually expect.
Yes, and now that you say that, that's my memory too. Full employment in
Still the
particular.
case today.
More or less, I was less involved with that.
Yeah.
Well, we did that last year for this year. But going forward with all the changes we have in place, we actually looked at. And we actually, we didn't include the vacancies, but they included in reduced positions, things like that. So that it, to your point now, it is more in line with, the revenue enrollment numbers. And the expenditure numbers, we're not. There's not any, I don't want to say over budgeting, but there's.
It's not a tighter budget.
It's not-
It's a tighter.
Right.
Yeah. What's evident is how much it has been scrutinized. I think. There is a level of. It is a less conservative approach in that respect, which I'm not disagreeing with. I'm just being mindful of it, that we're walking into something where our our shop group has to be tighter on both revenue and expense side.
We do,
Yeah.
Okay.
agreed, yes.
We can appreciate the purpose for that, because the purpose for that is we're not laying off staff.
Right.
Like we would have to if we were gonna do a conservative budget, so
Yes,
not a disagreement, just.
and what I said before about, I'm hopeful that next spring, we're not looking at another reduction. I can't say that I'm confident there yet. I think we've set ourselves up to where we're not. But to your point, we could face more challenges next spring as well.
Things that we have assumed in the past,
Yes.
such as we are not gonna fill all FTEs,
Mhm.
are not accounted for.
Mhm.
Right,
The-
rightly so.
Yes, and to that point too, take it one step further with the number of reductions that are happening in other districts, I think we'll have a lot of candidates for positions where we wouldn't have before. I don't know that a lot will go unfilled.
Okay, any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question on transportation.
Same question, yeah.
On 84, page 84. Previous years, transportation was between 8 and 9 million. The budget for this year is, budget for last year was 6.8 million, and then now we're back up to 9.
We've had a significant cost increase. My belief is that we weren't calculating those cost increases in past years correctly, and now we're doing actual real costs.
Is that why I saw in a lot of things, there was like 1 year it's cheaper, the next year it's way more expensive, then it's cheaper, then it's way more expensive on the budget.
I don't know that I can explain all of that. I can explain that in the chaos of ESSER money and after pandemic, we were doing pretty simple budgets moving forward with a 3% roll up. And whether those were spent or not, that's where we were. That is not the case anymore. We had a different luxury then, now we don't.
Mine's kind of related, it's on page 72. For the support services business, transportation, it's bus. I think it's $6.5 million increase. It seems a lot.
Where are we in school? 65 or 72?
72, yeah. The increase to it is what caught my attention.
Function 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's,
Transportation.
it is transportation again.
And repairs.
Yes, 72 is a summary that includes 84.
Okay,
So you're right to draw that correlation. One is the summary, one is the specific.
it just surprises me that it's so much less this year. You know, for this school year, we're $6.5 million less more budgeting for next year.
That is where that's what I put out as transportation is one of our goals.
And is this year's number tracking higher than what we have here then?
Yes.
Okay,
At our last. I probably absolutely the wrong person to jump in, but at our last business meeting, the finance staff alerted us that we'd probably have to do a supplemental.
okay.
Budgetary action in order to move money so that we can handle
So it's
transportation.
not really a $6.5 million. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, it's just over 4 years. The new number is right, it just took us longer to get there. Sure.
Any other questions?
I have one last one. Page 88. The top of your budget goes down, but my recollection, and I know a lot of teachers, I know a bunch of admins, I know coaches. is they use a lot of paper. It's kind of hard to have kids without paper in front of them to do math or do art or whatever the other activities they're doing. It seems like we can say we're gonna cut it, but can we really cut that?
Is it just showing someplace else?
Well, I'll answer his question directly. You can cut. It is not easy. You're right. There are some accesses that teachers, principals, everybody does that they can look at. There are some ways of teaching that don't require as much paper to do that we'd like people to adopt. However, it is a paper having industry, you're right.
Yeah, in mathematics on a computer or a smartphone is not the same thing.
So when John kind of opened this, he shared that about 40% of our total reductions were related to non-payroll.
Yeah.
We literally dug into copies, right? Trying to identify places where we could make reductions. And so there are some efficiencies that can be gained in different ways. Like using a print shop, things like that, that we can promote that can help us to get that funding.
Yeah.
That was a part of turning over every rock.
Let's go. Point
Okay.
of order that might be, or not, based on my text message history. Can a non-committee member ask a question?
Under
Did we
public
miss?
health.
Yeah, so we had that question that came up at the board meeting, and so.
There's a section on the agenda for public.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
next.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's where I'm trying to go to.
Text them back now.
So if there's no other comments from the committee,
I'm not done.
One more.
there's no limit.
Well, I have one more tab, so I might as well ask. Page 74. Insurance costs going up 35%. But again, looking at the trend. Liability insurance was over $1 million. Slashed in half 1 year.
We have fluctuated, I just had our meeting with our insurance company, Friday. We've had good claims years and not so good claim years. When you look back at when they were low in particular, a lot of that was pandemic, post-pandemic related, very few claims. This year, we've actually have a lot of claims. As of last week, we had 51, where normally we're in the 20s. So next year will be big. They use 5 years together to establish our rates. Our rates are gonna go up about $84,000 next year, just 83.8, something like that.
What is it? A typical claim for it, because I have no idea.
Why did it go up?
It went up this year. A typical claim could be, the ice storm, we had a lot more injuries of custodial staff this year getting out in buildings, so that we had a spike in February. There was a big, there are employees that are injured when you have kids with disabilities who, have behavior issues or outbursts. That does happen as well. It could be simple trip and fall at playgrounds as well.
Which would be a property claim.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had the same question.
Is there like a? Dan, if you're done. I've got another-
Yeah, I use up all mine.
Okay. Is there like a high level dollars per pupil of revenue year over year? So like all source dollars per pupil,
The state school fund
and
does.
yeah, we can stick to general fund.
They use a ratio and put it into amount based on total enrollment in the state, total funding available in the state, and I believe 141. Who pays the same? On that right-hand page, second from the bottom section, it gives the rate,
This is page 144.
gives the rate for ADMW, which is our rated rate. And it gives a general purpose ADMW, which is general schools. And that's where we get the ADMW rate for charter schools. And the part of the reason for the increase in charter school budget for this coming year is the rate for last year versus this year on GBS students and charter school students. That rate increased about $1,000 per student. And that's been the largest increase I've seen in my time between years. So that is kind of, but that's where we kind of start when we're generating a cost per student for the funding piece.
How is that different than last year's?
Excuse me,
What's the increase amount?
I don't have that.
Okay.
Take this number with a grain of salt, with the special revenue included. We are right in the neighborhood of 17,000 per student. Special revenue, everything, but that is really quick math here,
Yeah.
so.
Then sort of what I'm trying to wrap my head around is how much has that changed year over year?
It has changed. If you want to look at 2016, again, 16, 17, roughly. And that was pre-special revenue. We were at about 10,000 per student.
That's a working real dollar value.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping for.
In real dollars, how you referring to?
Yeah, well, like $1 in 1880 is worth,
Inflation adjusted.
Yeah, I don't know the inflation adjustment. Yeah.
dollars worth a different amount over time, so.
Yep.
Becky was able to give me the rates from last year
Okay,
on the same sheet. And this was in
Did you have a graph
March of 2024.
in 101? Did you have a graph with that?
Did not.
The general purpose grant amount is 10,450. And the charter school amount was the same.
10,000.
10,450.
Not the same as this year.
No, but they were the same as,
so same as
for the they were the same number for last year. This year, we'll see there's a significant difference between those two numbers.
So that's why we're getting hammered on.
I should write the legislature.
And then the comparable to the 10,450 is 11,554 this year? Or the 11,
This year, the general student is 11,087.
okay,
Right. And the charter is 12,100.
the reason I'm doing this math real quick is my existence is in places where cost creep is all over the place. And so I'm curious. Yes, that's a 6 and change % increase per head. Which I think if you asked kind of a non-service organization for a 6% increase per customer, they would be pretty happy with it.
Yeah.
So to be crabby about the costs, that means that if we're getting a 6% boost in revenue for 8, 9, 10 on the expense side. And so where are we losing ground to? I guess proportionality. I saw purchase services, we got hammered. I know we spoke to some of that, but. Is there a better answer than purchase services? Cause I guess what I would, again, just math view of the world, right, here, revenue goes up by 6. Expenses should go by inflation, which would be 1 or 2%, especially with declining. So that means that you've got a 4+% revenue margin based on inflation. So we just took your expense budget, copy paste plus inflation, you'd be about 0.2 higher than you are. We're 10 points higher.
What about settling labor contracts and other things?
Right. So
Yeah.
I know there's some
Right.
multiple years in there. But I think that's,
So in this budget, we budgeted in what we anticipate for settling the classified contract next year. So that's in there. We just settled with our teachers for 13 over 3 years. And so that first year's in there as well. It'll explain the majority of what you just saw. Because we did budget in for next year. We have to do that because we know we're gonna get negotiated.
Yeah.
There's gonna be an administrative cost increase too, because we haven't settled that agreement with our administrators either.
And you're right, purchase services, it was purchase services as transportation, purchase services as charter school payments, those were two huge.
Is our grading software, and software type stuff, is that software as a service that we're using, or is it a licensed application that we host?
It's software as a service. You can just, our student information system synergy is a cost. Other things that we use to manage different things, our cybersecurity is a cost. All of those softwares are in there. Okay.
I work in IT, so I'm seeing a
Yeah.
huge cost increase in the, it sounds like you're gonna save a lot on software as a service.
Well, imagine, and I don't know if it's counted in textbooks or not, but now our textbooks are internet based. It's all software things and stuff. But I think that's counted in textbooks as opposed to software.
It's a little bit, complex. Object number 0470, 0420 and 0462 all kind of have a ratio split of that true curriculum. And it is based on the best determinations of our accounting team. And then our audit folks always have something to say about it, because the difference between what counts as a subscription-based software, the world is changing. We're trying to move along with it.
It's trying to move really hard to subscription base.
It is. And our textbook adoptions are.
Yeah.
So in the past, this is
Or
our,
combination.
this is why we cannot do what we used to do in the past. If you have set asides for textbook purchases. In the past, when we got into economic crises, 2008, other places, we could put that off because we had hard books for kids. You can't do that anymore. Our adoptions are 5 years. You have to buy new. So we can't not put set asides away anymore. Or you won't have the money to purchase those things which are absolutely needed. Same with turf, same with all the other things too. We have to replace that when it gets unsafe and we're not planning on it. So those set asides have to happen.
About turf, on page 77, are we doing some more replacement project based on the price increases on the grounds? That's my last question.
Which look, where you're looking,
The very bottom line, page 77.
I think there's growth on both 77 and 78. If I could piggyback on Bane's question that I was gonna ask too.
Yeah.
On grounds and maintenance, property services are higher on both.
It seems like a pretty big increase. And I know that when you replace turf, it's not cheap.
yeah, and we're not replacing turf right now, but a football field does run, I think it's upwards of 3 million now, yeah, to do that. These, I believe, I'm looking at grounds chair. Depending on the years, these fluctuate. So if you look at the ice storm from 23-24, the amount of services we had to bring in was huge. So then this last year wasn't as much. We had 2 days off. I believe that that is budgeting what we might anticipate based on past years.
Okay.
So could I just get a confirmation?
Yeah.
So we also brought on the student health center. In that time, as well as the turf facilities, is that line growing as a result of any of that activity?
No.
It is, I mean, it's an incurred expenditure district, it's part of the general. And, yeah, we pay utilities, we pay landscaping, a lot of folks do landscaping. Most of the work that goes on inside the building is covered by walls, but we still maintain the property, the utilities, the water. As part of that new building.
Do they pay property service pass through at all?
Not the board.
And how long is that contract? These can be questions for another day. I have questions about that.
Okay, I'll try again.
I mean, I think I have a question on what is property services? Is it just the storm recovery, or is there other things that fall in?
Some of it, but there are other things that we contract for, even not even storm recovery. We bring in a service to plow our parking lots when there's snow. So that's not storm recovery, but it is maintenance.
Yeah. That just contract rates going up, driving a lot of that different assumption.
I can ask Terry, but I'm assuming that, yes. We're not.
Well, you can
Literally, you are.
I understand, yeah.
You can guarantee when you take it out of here that you will.
Yeah, you're not wrong.
That was a week I don't want to ever repeat.
Well, it's also a very hard thing to budget because it's not you can't go out and bid that service.
Yeah.
It's who's available the morning you need it, and they get to charge what they get to charge if you want to work that.
When, I mean, that weekend this year, it was a premium. We had wrestling, Mountain Hood Conference at Gresham. We needed to get that building ready for Saturday. We had other things we just had to do, and it is a premium when you do it.
an item for another day. Would just be interesting where you have municipalities who can leverage FEMA assistance in instances of huge disasters like the winter storm qualified a couple years ago. Be interesting if that contracted service could be a pass through a municipal partner rather than having to handle it.
You can make the FEMA claim,
Yeah,
but that's post getting the work done.
that's true.
Because if you wait for FEMA to approve it before you get the work done, you get 3 seasons.
Yeah.
around.
It's sunny now, yeah.
Okay,
Wallace is 5 years. School-based health center.
So what was that, John?
Wallace, school-based health center is a 5-year contract.
Starting August 2024.
Yes.
okay, moving on to public comment.
I just have another question.
Oh,
The debt service and transfers, I'm looking at page 3, but I'm referencing last year's budget document, is 31.5 this year. It's been more like 21 something in prior years. What was there?
What page was that again?
Page 3.
It's the audit finding, and so we had to change the way that we're recognizing the first bonds.
Okay.
Do you want to give a recap?
That's exactly it. It's not a new actual expenditure of dollars, but it must be reflected based on those audit findings differently in the budget.
Got it. So I guess the revenue offset, there would be a revenue
Yes.
offset for it then?
Yep,
Okay, and
exactly.
that's.
Local is
sitting in-
counted as local revenue and revenues and expenditures equal, but yes, that inflated both.
Now, where it's, oh, there you go, revenue from taxes, debt services.
Correct.
Fund is the offset.
Yes.
Okay.
And that might be just an important thing, budget committee members might not know. We did switch audit firms this year, so there was a different approach, some different priorities and ways to kind of address the audit that now is starting to be reflected in what we see today.
Nothing was done wrong.
Right,
We purposely wanted a different look because we had the same firm for a long time and they really, because they were new, they dug in really, really hard and made some strong recommendations for how to account for funds moving forward, and we're making those changes. And it's hard.
Like audit firms also like to, look, I found something, that's why you're ready. That very. I saw, though I don't have the page reference, property acquisition.
Oh, yeah. What page?
When I don't.
Give it back
have
there.
it,
Oh, you said no page, you didn't remember the page number, I'm sorry.
when I bring things, I can look them up again. And you start from the. Somewhere around.
There is.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Building acquisition, 4150 is page 109.
Well, no.
Something not have changed, so, and
No. Well, it is.
Because we.
Yeah, I think I agree.
Money in the budget.
There was a small piece of property, I believe this is related to it on Chase Road. I can't remember when we got it or who we got it from. It was a gift to the district, I believe, a long time ago, that house. It didn't have any use for us, so keeping it didn't make any sense. The board approved selling it. I don't remember when the board approved selling it, but it was recent.
So what is it? Is it proposed in the 2025-26 budget because it has not completely closed?
That's just.
That's a good question.
It's just showing it as an expense, not as
It's-
a.
We received the money for the sale of the Chase property. And so it was recognized, in the monthly function. Then, this is just a placeholder to record that we have that money. Right now, there's no intent to do anything with it, but in order to show that we have that money still, that we had to put it in the line.
And this is mine not being an accountant. It seems like it ought to be a credit and not an expense. Am I reading this right?
No, you're the same way.
That's right.
You're showing an expense.
I'm wondering if I'm gonna lob a theory, see how it sticks.
Please, Bob.
That sale was correlated with an anticipated purchase of the vacated Multnomah County Library site.
No.
That ended up not being.
Not that property. This
Well,
is
both
the-
properties.
Both of them.
Both of them.
No, I think it's the net proceeds. What do you think, Pete?
I can speak with 80% accuracy on this, and I please invite my other Jersey wearers to jump in. I don't believe that this is related to the well-intentioned theories of what were proposed so far.
Okay.
Object 520 does not mean brick and mortar buildings. It is a legal determination by generally accepted accounting principles and audit rules that anything that we consider capital equipment, that's what that is. And we always try to put in some so that we don't have to come back to the board for de minimis purchases. That, I believe, was the intent. So when we need to make capital purchases, say for instance, a lawnmower, anything that's valued at over $5,000 and has a useful life of more than 1 year must, according to GAAP, be categorized as a capital purchase. Capital purchases must fall under this designation of 520. So although we don't plan on spending it, we do want to have some minimum amount to not have to come back to the board every single time we need to purchase a lawnmower or anything larger than 5,000.
When's the last time that $5,000 figure was changed? It seems like that's been around a while.
Yes, it has. But the rules for determining those things are set by GASB, the Government Accounting Standards Board. And if you can reach out to your congresspeople to get them to change things, I've got a list for you.
How did I see all my things cost that much?
Yeah, all my worlds of $5,000.
Question about that theory then, if that's true, I'm not saying you're wrong, but that means we didn't have any actuals in 22, 23, 23, 24 for those type of things?
Only in function 4150. Object 520 can exist in other functions.
Got it.
So because we're highlighting page 109, I was just.
Could I, oh, sorry.
You don't just say, so you buy a piece of capital and then it would hit elementary education.
It would depend.
Right.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
But it'd be in another one.
and so it'd move out
Yeah.
of this,
That's good.
but it would be on line 520 in that other
That's
area.
exactly correct.
Okay.
Could I drill that one a little bit more though? So would that object also exist in groundskeeping? So to your point, like would the lawnmower actually appear in groundskeeping?
And because we can't determine to that level of specificity in the future,
Oh,
it's put here as a placeholder because like you were just saying, it could be elementary, it could be high school, it could be athletics, it could be grounds. You know, there's only so much we can plan for by function.
You'd make a mess if you get a right function.
Yeah.
$5,000.
Better to have a
100
placeholder, one
places and then.
lump sum, yeah, than
99 of them are wrong.
10,000
Yeah.
and 50 places. Yeah.
Okay,
I can appreciate that.
do we have any public here that want to make comments?
I have a question.
Would you please state your name for the record and whether you live with this?
Yes, my name is Samantha McWilliams. I'm the PTSO president at Hogan Cedars Elementary School, and I'm also a substitute teacher in the district, and I'm mixed wife as well.
I'm a much smarter half. of me.
I have not poured over every page. But as I was looking through it, I noticed in the English or English language learning programs, there's about a $200,000 reduction, and I'm curious about how many STEs that is and how that's going to affect dual language immersion classes, or if it's going to affect the small group pull-out sessions for the ELL students, and what that's gonna look like. And so I know some students go across school boundaries to join those classrooms, so I'm just curious how that's gonna. If you guys even have that answer yet, I don't even know.
I can in theory reply.
part of what's happening with DLI specifically is we are adding classroom teachers, so general fund teachers that are teaching EML students who also have endorsements to cover that EML service. So actually in our DLI schools, we can reduce some of the EML support because actually the whole school is like this, all of it's EML support. So there's some shifting that's happening with that as we're expanding to
Okay, thank you. I was just curious because I saw that the number of
Yeah.
ELL students is increasing.
And some of it's we're offset, we're adding FTE to a classroom, so we have a DLI classroom, so then that's.
When, and to that note, to point even more, we used to have newcomer centers for students at the elementary level. And most of, I mean, we still do for students that don't speak Spanish. But for those Spanish speaking students, they're now going to DLI programs, so we didn't need as much FTE or newcomer because they're getting served in regular classes.
Gotcha.
There's a whole lot of those.
Yeah.
So if, are the newcomers from Barlow eventually gonna start being bused to Gresham and Barlow's gonna start keeping them?
Well, rolling DLI up, we're still 3 years away from that. It's gonna be 6th grade next year in middle school. Knowing where we are with numbers, then that's a hard one to predict. Would we like to? Yes. That answer that? Because I think we should have, if we're gonna both high schools.
Yeah, so then we're increasing and DLI endorsed teachers as well.
And to give you guys an understanding, because that's a reasonable question and it's something we should aim for. An average cost for us for a full-time equivalent certified teacher right now, counting roll-ups, is $142,000. So every time we talk about adding a classroom, it's substantive, especially in this budget. To give you another example, just the personal finance law that came in, which said we need to teach personal finance in high schools, and that is absolutely true. It's a needed skill. For us to do that, we needed $750,000. It just didn't come. So we're in a bad spot. So when people give us those unfunded mandates and we talk about adding teachers or other things, it's not as easy as just saying that.
Okay. Any other?
I do have a couple of comments. Olivia Green, I'm a math teacher at Gresham High School, full-time, I'm going to graduate from Gresham High School. I wasn't gonna make a comment until hearing some conversation, and I'm gonna take it back to, it was copier services. And I know this is like getting in the weeds of that piece, but as a teacher on the ground, and I'm looking at it going from $250,000 to $100,000 to $56,000 for copier services. In my building, teachers beg and borrow from other teachers to get copies because we have copier limits. We have teachers who go to Kinko's and make their own copies because they spent their copier limit for a month. I had teached, I realized we're talking $150,000. But I also know we have the $500,000 we just said sat in a line item to maybe buy a lawnmower that we need. But yet we're taking $150,000 out of an essential, in my opinion, line item for teachers that are on the ground every day, trying to provide stuff in a district where we have students who don't come to school with supplies. And we have to make photocopies for them. And we are being hindered in our pedagogy by trying to make a decision on whether or not I'm gonna make a photocopy today. Literally, today I was like, do I make a photocopy or do I have my students put on the whiteboard? Because if I have them open up their computers, it's gonna take 10 minutes to get them started. So do I have 10 more minutes of instruction or do I make a photocopy? So I get it's $150,000, but I would encourage you to think about that line item and some of those day-to-day supplies. Again, I wasn't going to speak, but it's near and dear to my heart on an everyday battle right now.
I'd like to add that too, as a volunteer and a sub, like I see how much the students really do actually need those paper worksheets, you know. Subbing today, I'm not gonna say which class or anything, but the kids, they were on their tablets for their daily rotations and I kept having to ask them not to goof off on their computers. And if they had a worksheet in front of them, there's probably still would be some goofing off, but they wouldn't be able to find gifts to look at and put on a presentation. So it wouldn't be as distracting, and I'm not saying we shouldn't use the Chromebooks, because they are really a useful tool. But I do feel like having the paper worksheets is still a very valuable thing in the classroom.
The points are well taken. And now you see the choices that all of us are having to make, and none of them are easy. Because we're looking at people versus material versus if we need something in facilities to maintain a building. All of these things end up being very, very difficult choices that I wish we didn't have to make, but they're real. And I don't want to dismiss those. I also know that, John, as we get to the questions piece, so I want to know that you're heard. I also know from that 10,000-foot view of doing a district budget, even 500,000 at facilities is extremely tight. Given what we have to do, especially in a district this size. So as we do that.
And you had somebody that. A neighbor or something that had a question and said,
My wife,
oh. Yeah. We'll take care of that.
I would like to
Yeah.
share a little bit as well.
Sure.
Obviously, the work you guys are doing is really important. I'm Jeremiah, and by the way, I'm a teacher at Dexter McCarty Middle School. And my girls both graduated going through North Gresham Elementary, Clear Creek, and Gresham High School. So again, I just appreciate the work you're doing. It is making my head spin over here, and I'll probably have dreams of numbers, dancing in my head. Maybe all of us will tonight. But I just want to share a little bit about the good things that are happening, not just at my middle school, but all the middle schools as people that fill my position as the athletic coordinator at the middle school work to support some of the extracurricular programs that our 5 middle schools offer. Obviously, when we're counting numbers like this and penny pinching, we can kind of lose track of things that don't happen when we have to reduce, because we're focused on how do we reduce, but we're also missing that we might be reducing other things that are really important for the growth of our students. For those of you that have heard me before last week specifically, I perhaps some new stories to share. So I'm going to start with a story about an individual in our building, a student. I'm going to call him Bob. I don't think there's a middle school kid with the name Bob in this generation. And I don't think there's anybody in this room with that name either. I guess I'll say that. But this student is an 8th grader this year. And when he started as a 6th grader, he had been hit by a car on Powell Boulevard the summer before his 6th grade year. So he showed up in a wheelchair, long time of physical therapy and working to correct his movement skills because his leg had some real traumatic injury to it. But he was not a kid that you were to keep down, right? Like he had surely some self-motivation to get back to being an active child. But he's also been consistently participating in our after-school programs, specifically basketball and wrestling over the years that he's been with us. Like I said, now he's an 8th grader. He is consistently positive. Even though he wouldn't make the varsity team in our building, probably not in any building. But he works really hard. And I think recognizing that the combination of his self-motivation as well as the opportunity within our building to participate beyond the school day and improve his own physical fitness and movement skills has just increased his ability to enjoy school and want to be at school. And that's just a huge thing. He's even got himself now as an 8th grader in the top 10% of our PACER scores for PE fitness testing. And that's as a PE teacher, that's a really important piece to me, is how can we get kids off their backside, away from their screens, to be active, to increase their personal health and their fitness. when we are way behind where we were 10 years ago with kids' activity levels and fitness. And I think the after-school sports programs offer such a huge piece to that. Such a huge opportunity to help kids be active for an hour, hour and a half a day where they wouldn't normally get that. You know, when we don't have these middle school programs, after school sports related programs, we're not building the community that we build when we do have them. We're not getting people into the buildings, whether those are students or parents coming to watch those games. Other things that grow because that after school program is respect for each other, but also kind of a respect and pride in the school that they're in. And I think if we looked close at all of our middle schools and our high schools right now, we would see an upward trajectory of that growing pride and confidence in our buildings. Having kids go through Gresham High School the last 4 years, I would say Gresham High School still has some work to do on that. Obviously, there's some real challenges in that building that are kind of pulling that back. But what I've seen at my middle school and at Clear Creek, working with those leaders, is that respect within and between students, and that confidence within the students is growing because they have these avenues to test themselves and to gain skills and to work on a team and to practice leadership. And I guess I'll just close with that is, you know, when I get a chance to talk with Ty Gonrosky at Gresham, he shared stories with me about the increases that he's seen in the numbers of kids being willing to put themselves, you know, into tryouts or on a team. And I would obviously expand that into your music and your choir and your theater programs, because that confidence has to be built somewhere. We can't wait for that confidence to be built when they're freshmen. It has to start earlier, and I think that's the vital role there. After school programs, sports or otherwise, even our like PI club. We have an active Asian American Pacific Islander club in our building. That program also offers, you know, leadership development and confidence growth for kids. So as you guys are making important decisions here, I just would ask that keep that in mind and you know, do what you can to secure that middle school after school sports program, because I can tell you great things are happening in all of our middle schools because of that program. So thanks for listening.
Thank you.
I think there's something to ask. 'Cause
Yeah.
my kids were both athletes too, so I didn't see it here, and I'm sure it's in here somewhere. What is the middle school, high school athletics?
We made it specific towards some leadership teams, and that's why there's productions in other areas to not go down that route. So what we proposed to you is status quo.
I have previously asked for more money.
John, can you reiterate that it is a status quo, it is not a reduction of those programs?
It is not.
Awesome.
It was hard to do, but Jeremiah made it speedy. There's a bit of, we didn't reduce the budget, but what are you gonna add to this?
Well, it's, of course, like, I feel like this is broken record. It is a little bit complicated though, because, I'm Sarah, by the way, hi. So, and I've been working closely with our OST coordinators and we're gonna really utilize their expertise to think about how to maintain as much programming as possible, but we added a sport this year, volleyball, and we weren't unsure like exactly about what that was going to cost us. You know, we can ballpark it, but by the time all was said and done, we had amazing turnout. It was incredible, and it cost about $100,000. So all in total, just OST, which is like our after school, middle school programs, are after this year, we can ballpark it if we took last year's total plus volleyball, because we don't have all the totals in for actuals. You know, we've looked at actuals through boys basketball. We're at about $600,000. So it's significant, and so what we're trying to do is look at all the ways. We already looked at our non-payroll and said, you know, we had about ballpark $25,000 just in startup. When you bring on a new sport, you gotta have new jerseys, you have to have equipment, all of the things. But the vast majority of that cost is payroll, which comes in the form of coaching stipends and things of that nature. Even our referees and things like that, they're pushed into non-payroll because those are considered professional services. So that's not contributing to the payroll, which is total actual in 23-24 was over $400,000 of a $500,000 total. So we are just looking at, okay, how can we keep kids engaged? Can we keep everything going? And I really appreciated Jeremiah's statement about we have no intention to cut these programs in the sense that they won't exist. But do we need to put heads together to figure out what are some ways where we can be more efficient, or we can make it so that we have lots of participation, but maybe cut back on some of the payroll costs? That's kind of what we're looking to do. So we're looking at everything. So got some ideas. Ultimate goal, it'd be nice to not have that extra $100,000 that volleyball costs us. If there was a way to take that away, take part of it as 25,000 as a startup cost. We're not adding any sports next year. But maintaining what we have and seeing if we could get some reductions in there is our goal. So I'll continue to work with OST to figure that out.
Okay. Good, thank you. So, it's 9 o'clock, or a little after. We have two choices. We can adjourn and come back and have more discussion, or we can take an action and approve the budget as it sits in front of us. So it's up to the committee. Thoughts?
What are the people that ask the most questions? Thanks. Nick?
The burning eyes, he's like, well.
Hey, you definitely, you guys have a great skill set. Yeah. And I appreciate it. These are great questions. So, I mean, how do you feel?
I mean,
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm
No,
sorry
it's
like
like,
that.
I wanted to kind of say, I mean, I feel uncomfortable with signing off on the budget with the FTEs the way it is without, and I think there is probably a really good, like, it's just a classification, or, you know, I think the answer is something like that, but I feel uncomfortable putting it through, if for no other reason than we got a $9 million hole and a 3 FTE increase in admin. Again,
Is that something that can be addressed at the committee level, because don't we have an ability for 10% fluctuation?
Actually, yeah, we have a 10% option to increase. I
Option.
believe we can reduce.
But I'm
it.
saying is the FT, if your concern was addressed at that meeting level, would that make you feel better? Or do we need to come back again so they can come up with a piece of paper to make you feel confident? I want you confident.
yeah, well, I mean, I think the hard part is I either have to vote for it or against it
Sure.
at this meeting.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too, is like,
Yeah.
there's two things that concern me, because. You know, I work in IT and I use a lot of paper. My desk is covered with post-it notes. Because I have things, you know, big projects that go on big sheets. I have post-it notes for things I have to do immediately. And taking away paper from a classroom. I get it's all money, but it's like, that one's like, you know, are we cutting that one too sharply?
So let's look at overall committee work
Yeah.
done. That's a line item.
I know it is.
It's an operations piece, and those are things if we needed to adjust for in the middle of the year, we can adjust for necessarily. FTE, bigger number, that's for sure. And I understand the question as well. And what I'm worried about, given what we illustrated before, is giving you an exact number. We could give you an exact number right now, and then an exact number what we anticipated wouldn't necessarily be the budget book, based on what we can publish in the budget book. And that would answer your question. I would be reticent to get into that line item piece.
Yeah,
if we have to manage going
I
forward.
wouldn't vote no over that. I'm just saying, the staffing thing, you know, but you know. If the staffing across the 3 categories is essentially, you know, that one page makes it look like it's really coming out of one group and not the other 2. And I'm, you know. When I was in school, I remember the teacher in front of me. You know, earlier in time, I remember the principal in front of me. It's good.
this is a true answer. When it comes to non-payroll, we did start there, and that was 40% of those reductions. The district office bore a third, some of that classified, or some of it certified, some of it certified, some of it admin. And buildings, it was mostly certified. There was very little classified that we touched. And that was purposeful as well, because our elementaries are running at bare bones.
So the little, small graph or,
Yeah.
section at the bottom isn't really explaining that. And then
Mhm.
if that's, the reality is, that's not what's happening, then I'm cool with it.
Yeah.
I just know we need teachers in front of kids.
Mhm.
And we also need all the other people. It's because if you don't have admin to take care of discipline,
The other thing, and then we can, you, as a committee, you guys obviously can talk more, is what I also want to qualify and what I've learned in a lot of time is, without that support for the classroom that's outside, helping teachers with instruction, helping them improve, you don't grow as an organization either. So when we look at coaches and all those other things that are not necessarily classroom, but they're support for the classroom, we don't want to be as cut and dry of teachers in front of students, although I don't want to dismiss that, that's absolutely not.
I obviously want sports.
Right, and the sports piece is not teachers in front of classrooms, all of those things. So as a committee, we do need to stay at about a 10,000 foot level for sure on how we're looking at the budget. Everything matters at this point because we've been on a shoestring for a long time. FTE is a very good clarifying question, and I think we can put it in a different way to show you that you have it. I think that's reasonable for sure. And like,
Cause I think, and to that point, like, if we were to say, no, this is real, and again, I think there's a different explanation, like, this is real, we are gonna add 3, and here's the experience it's gonna make on a day-to-day basis for teachers, and so this is an intentional investment, and that's why we're doing it, and it looks awful, but this is why we're doing it, then I would have zero concern.
and I can tell you, we're not adding.
Exactly.
So,
It's
but, so
something
your
that-
question is on point.
And with that on FTE, I don't know that the 3 is, the question is so much as if you're saying it's 1178 now.
Yeah, I have to go back and look for sure. And that's total
Well,
FTE.
and
It's
it's
not.
employees versus FTE.
Yeah, and I'm only talking FTE because, everybody's got multiple hats, but the proposed budget's 1073.
Yeah, I feel like it's, and maybe like, if, I feel like I would feel comfortable if there was some bridge between here's where we are, here's like the budget next year, like, so we can see, okay, current staffing or last 12 months staffing was.
Well,
Well, and when do the real numbers come out? August,
Audited numbers don't come out until
January.
yeah, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Thinking about you,
But in 101, you laid it out in the goal of 1150 something, which even still is, 80 off of what's proposed in the budget.
And what I did, because going back to that budget piece, is you go to HR right then, what do we have?
Yeah.
So I'm just telling you in real time what we have right then. The budget's based on when we have to pull those snapshots and kind of make it look different.
if you're gonna change the presentation of it, I would say, you a 110 coach, person, and that's a different line item than admin. Or a teaching teacher's assistant or a teacher. That's a totally different thing, and it might, obviously don't want to cut them, I'm just, it falls into a different bucket, as you said.
And that's where I'm trying to envision, how do we present that to you so that it's clear, knowing how we divide FTE between those buckets.
And I
Go-
think- go ahead.
Do you have the goal number from last year?
The same number from last year?
Yeah, I mean, is there a correlation between, last year, if our goal was 1183 for FTE on the budget. And then throughout the year, additional funding for grants funded extra FTE, and we ended up at, 1285. Is that increase connected to specific grants that we can map out from this last year that we ended up at 1150 and we're budgeting for 1073?
I think that's where we're gonna have some challenges. I'm just being super honest. When we're talking about the numbers between special revenue and general fund, we are still moving people daily between those funds, figuring out next year. And so although we know what the reductions are, and I would say that's more true with classified and licensed in terms of, are they general fund or are they special revenue? I have questions about the admin thing too. I'm not quite sure how that's playing out, and maybe you have an answer. But just in terms of like getting into the details of who is funded and how and which box they fall into is going to be trickier than just the bottom line number. Just in terms of like, as I'm literally working through who we're gonna reassign and pay for how, that's all still.
I feel like my ask would be not, and maybe this is just me, I don't know that who's putting the bill is necessarily on my, like grant versus general fund, that doesn't do it for me, but again, I can understand where.
I'm not there either.
But I think that's where seeing, you know, because I also have a little bit of, I want to wrap my head around sort of the reductions and where those sort of were real bodies versus now are not. Just, and that's informational more than anything else, but like if you could see sort of, these were the full FTEs versus the budget FTEs, and maybe just by these categories back here, the it's licensed classified admin, like even that level, I think is enough to say, here's how these three major categories that move over time from actual to next year's budget. And then that would sort of settle, at least for me.
Kind of look into Becky.
And Tracy, what you're saying is exactly right. It's the shifting, general fund, and we knew that was, very complex. As, even though those numbers are still sifting out, would you say, Tracy, that our, plan, reflects about a minus 50 licensed FTE from general fund and about a plus 20 in spec rev for an overall difference of about 30.
Yeah.
In nice, pretty round numbers.
Yes. And everybody understand what,
Yeah, and those are the numbers that you had.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago.
right,
Okay. Was a reduction of 30.
right.
And that's budget to budget. Or is that?
That's actual.
That's actual.
Actual.
That's actual. And you're right, that is reflective of what was last time, because that was real numbers.
Yeah,
Moving in,
they were, yeah, so it made it a
Yeah.
lot easier to understand.
yeah. See, I was struggling with showing you without showing you the sheets with names on them and what the conversations we had.
Then I guess another question is, does any of that movement between budget categories and dividing people, 10 ways from Sunday, any of that change the budget item for the dollar amount of salaries and benefits that are locked in?
I mean, they're estimates, they're not, I mean, they are our best estimates.
And remember,
But I mean, it's the total number. Right?
Exactly.
It's
we're
wrong.
approving,
150,000.
we're approving the total budget.
Exactly.
Not pieces,
The
parts,
total,
and individuals.
the total for that person is X amount, it's chopped up in different places, but the total amount doesn't change when that gets amended.
Thank you.
What would the idea be? In essence, do we trust the people to make the right choices, the right situations with flux, with all the flux that you got going on?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that what it come down to? Because I think you guys have explained it perfectly well. I was like, I like that you got tabs, is because, man, I was like, I know my place at school and it wasn't that. But I mean, it really comes down to is like, if we're gonna trust the school board to make the best choices and decisions, we make.
Yeah.
And John and Tracy, and I mean, Pete and Becky are like ninjas over there. They're have been for years. And I personally do, because I've known all you for some time, and I know that you're here for the right reasons. And you wouldn't have to make choices and decisions that you didn't want to, or you couldn't. And I was like, and I know that you'd be open to explaining FTE, next week, in a month, in 2 months, when you get it figured out, and I know that you're available to do that. And so I feel confident moving forward. It's like, but I just want to make sure that everyone else on the budget committee is confident enough. I mean, especially with, like I said, I'm gonna trust you guys because you're in the positions, you look at the numbers all the time, and that. Your job. And. I'm gonna do my job. And hopefully everyone else does their job. And we're gonna hopefully have a great time in 2025. So John. I mean, do I dare?
There is a motion here for you.
Oh, yeah.
No, it's on there.
Oh, there's a, I don't know the process
Just,
of,
you need to read, just read it, read the top.
read the top.
Or read this motion. Motion is
For
made.
better or worse.
I just have to move.
True
Yeah,
or-
motion- I just,
Similar speed.
oh, yeah, I was like, so motion to approve proposed budget, motion is made. To approve the Gresham-Barlow School District 2025-26 budget as proposed,
Right,
amended.
no, not amended, you proposed.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Proposed / amended.
I don't
You
know.
can choose one of those.
Just propose.
You
Just
can
propose.
propose.
It's giving you an option. It's that,
I
it's
can
saying you
choose
choose
one.
one or the other.
Choose one or the other. Are we gonna
Propose.
I-
Go for it. We'll vote on it.
propose
Oh, yeah.
to go with it to establish the maximum total expenditures for each fund as follows? Am I supposed to read every single one off?
Yeah.
Is that why no one else wanted to? I mean, if that's what I gotta do for the team, all right.
You're doing well.
General funds as proposed, that would be 181,215,683. Special revenue fund, 66,200,191. Debt service fund would be 34,230,767. Capital projects fund, 4,948,000. For a total of all funds of 286,594,641. I am a product of North Gresham Grade School. I was just making Mr. Mills would be happy.
We actually need two motions, so
Two motions.
that's the first.
I don't have to read
That's the
anything
first
further.
No, so I would
Yeah.
second that.
Yep, so we have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Yeah, was there gonna be a discussion?
There's usually discussion where you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Ask for discussion.
Any discussion?
I think it's worthy of clarifying the process from here. So however the motion falls by vote, if it doesn't, we could probably make a subsequent motion to have an additional meeting. If it passes, then it will go through a public review. And the board will vote to approve the budget or not at our June meeting.
And you're referring to the. TSC.
So I think a question in there is because we've talked about the moving pieces and information can change. At what level would a change be so substantial that it might reconvene this committee or?
And it has to do with percentages.
Yeah.
Of dollar amounts, and I don't remember the.
10% in
Thank
any
you.
fund. Of total expenditures in any fund,
Okay,
Would then come back to the full budget committee,
We
not
have-
just the
yeah.
board.
and there'd have to be time to publish it again in the newspaper and so.
So September, federal funds didn't come through that we think should come through, then we just have to reconvene.
I can see where that would cause a reconvening of the committee.
but by September, you'd have a budget, and so really would be doing some
Supplementary.
supplemental
Well, we still
action.
potentially would have to get budget committee back together
Is the dollar amount would be.
because of the dollar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just think it'll be worth for the board there. I agree with Garrett, like this is clarification for me, but ultimately, right? I won't get any angry phone calls about this. I mean, unless somebody's really bored and they're like, I'm gonna go get the budget committee.
Yeah.
So I get behooves team and company to lock that answer down.
I think, board wise, hearing from board members in more one-on-ones, April, May, what would bring that clarity would be helpful, so we can understand that too.
And I would say, you know, we all emailed it, you know, as an informational thing, send it out to us, because it is an interesting data. point.
I mean, you've got the question. Could the team develop an answer and send it to all of us? That would be helpful.
Could be another insurance claim for how I try to figure this out.
Right. Okay, any other questions? Okay,
Voting.
Now you're involved.
Now we call it vote.
Do I just say it again?
No.
I want to hear.
Now-
I worked so hard.
all of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Uh,
Those opposed, same sign. Passes. Okay, good, and now you need to read again.
So do I go down to
It
the?
is it's further moved.
Yep.
It is further moved that the approved budget is to include assessment of the permanent tax rate of 4.5268 per 1,000 of taxable property value, which will levy approximately 37,441,000 in net taxes for the general fund operations, and is also to include a debt service fund tax levy of 23,654,755 for the purpose of servicing the district's general obligation bond long-term debts.
Okay,
Anything else?
any questions?
Second.
Yeah, actually, I think it goes.
Any questions?
Yeah, hey, is this part of our existing levy that we pay, or?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
yeah, that's what threw me off, like, didn't I already vote on this, like, as a voter?
It's
The voters have already approved it.
Okay.
We're not trying to slide a new.
Yeah, I was like, I read it, so, you know. I put one in there.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, nothing outside.
Clear for me.
Okay,
Next comment.
having no other questions, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Okay, all right, you've got a budget. For as good as, depending on what the states and feds do.
Maybe we'll reconvene.
And thank you for
I hope
it. No, well, I was like, you obviously, I was like, my.
I do have some closing remarks. We'll bring it back around. One, I am so happy to have been given the opportunity for 6 months to do this work and put a budget together in that short amount of time. So I want to thank the board personally, and we'll have conversations about that later. I do welcome and thank you for the deep conversation as well. And that you felt comfortable asking those questions. I appreciate that. We should have those open conversations as part of being a community. And I do thank you for that, no matter how hard the conversation can be sometimes. Other than that, thank you for the work and the dedication too. This is a late night and a long time, and I appreciate you being here.
Thank you for answering all our questions and explaining it. I appreciate it.
From here, do you guys, do you let, obviously, all the different schools, team principals, and other administrative staff who oversee those schools know that the amount was approved? Is that who you guys work with to maybe tweak things, move things around? I know I know the total is set, but is there more tweaking?
I'm happy to sit down. That's a complex question as well, and how we communicate that. And if you want, feel free to communicate with me. I'll sit down with you. I'll show you how we disseminate all this and what comes afterwards.
Thank you.
But the budget committee doesn't stay involved in that.
No, I didn't mean the
Yeah.
budget committee, I meant the administrative staff.
And administrators have been involved along the way.
Yes, they have.
I know, yeah. Now that they're gonna get an approved amount, you know.
For them, this will be, they haven't approved it out, 'cause they've been in the know for a while.
Okay, you're still the chair, so you get to decide whether or not we're adjourned.
I think we're adjourned.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you for your.